And we have a full house for our governor, Shintaro Ishihara, who is also our associate member and a great friend of the press club.
皆様こんにちは。ようこそお越しいただきました。今日は石原慎太郎様をお迎えできて大変嬉しく思っております。素晴らしい政治家だけではなく、我々のクラブの友人でもあります。実はメンバーでもあります。アソシエイトメンバーでいらっしゃいます。
Shintaro Ishihara is different. He's different like Junichiro Koizumi. Is different, like Toru Hashimoto, the mayor of Osaka, is different. It's what Mr. Inose, the vice governor of Tokyo, told us here at the press club a few days ago.
石原様は、ご紹介しなくても皆さんよくご存知だと思うんでございますが、本当に普通の政治家とちょっと違うところがございます。やはりそういう意味では小泉元総理にも似ていると思いますし、また橋本大阪市長にも似ているのではないかと思います。この人とは違う道を歩くっていうお話なんでございますが、これは先日猪瀬副知事も同じことを言ってました。
We have a limited strike right now at the press club and I want to apologize for it.
通常はここの部分を通訳しないんでございますが、一言皆様にお詫び申し上げたいということでございます。実は今日このクラブでストが起こっているんでございます。
Our union is making difficult for us to get Koeki Shadanojin status.
実は我々クラブといたしましては、公益社団法人という、ステータス、資格を取りたいということでございますが、それに関しましては我々の労働組合が反対しております。
A public interest organization status.
公益社団法人ということでございますが、我々は公益のためにいろいろ活動をしているというふうに考えておりますので、
The Nihon Kisha Club has already received the Koeki Shadanojin status.
もうすでに日本記者クラブはこの公益社団法人として認定されております。
We need the same status as the Nihon Kisha Club.
我々も同じようにこのような資格が認定が必要だというふうに考えております。
We are not less a public interest organization than the Nihon Kisha Club.
やはり日本記者クラブと同じように我々は公益に貢献しているというふうに考えております。
And today's luncheon with our distinguished guest Shintaro Ishihara exemplifies the role of a public interest organization the FCCJ plays in Japan.
やはり今日の記者会見、このような素晴らしいその石原知事の、講演を、開催できることはいかに日本において我々は、素晴らしい公益の活動をしているということの表しではないかと思います。
Today our club faces an existential threat. Our financial situation is very weak.
実は今、この記者クラブといいますのは、存在し続けられるかどうかという非常に大きな、課題を抱えております。財政的に非常に苦しい、立場におります。
And more than ever, we need your support.
日本同様という話がございました。
More than ever, we need your support if we want to continue to receive at the club great people like Shintaro Ishihara.
このように石原知事のような偉大なスピーカーを、迎え続けられるためには、我々は皆様のサポートをますます必要といたします。
He's a giant of Japanese politics.
日本の政界において彼は巨人でございます。
I try to be as controversial as he is sometimes.
私も真似てできるだけその論争の多い人間になろうとしております。
Reserve a very warm welcome to our associate member and Governor of Tokyo, Shintaro Ishihara. Thank you.
今日お招きをいただきましてありがとうございます。私ですね、去年の2月にここで尖閣諸島の問題でビデオをですね、あえて、ですね、要するに一部公開をした石木君というです、非常にしっかりした保安官の話を聞きました。
Thank you very much for your invitation today. Actually, I was here last year in February, I believe. This is when there was this problematic video that had been released in part to the public over the internet, showing the collision between Chinese fishing boat and Japan Coast Guard ship around the Senkaku Islands. The man who released the video was a man named Mr. Ishiki. He is an admirable young man, a former Coast Guard officer. I came to listen to him talk.
私がですね、あえてですね尖閣諸島をですね、 東京で買うという挙に出たということは、皆さんもちょっと意外に思われるでしょうし、まさにですね、これはね、筋違いの話で、本当は国がすべきことなんですけども、国がやらないから仕方なしに東京がやったということです。これが結論です。
In regard to the Senkaku Islands, as you know, I did come out and say that Tokyo City would purchase these Senkaku Islands. When you think about this, this is rather an extraordinary situation, and it's probably not the way things probably should have properly been done. Because in actuality, it should be the nation, the country of Japan, the national government that expressed a desire to purchase these islands. But because the national government would not do so, I had to step forward.
私はこの頃も年取ってね、英語読むのめんどくさくなりましたんでね、幸い日本でですね、ニューズウィークの日本語版が出てるんで、毎週買って読んでますが、何年か前ですね、非常に不思議な、要するに表紙のエディションを見ました。ニューズウィークはですね、いつも表紙になんか絵が描いてあるんですがね、その後はですね、なぜか知らんけど、星条旗が一面表紙に書いてあった。
I've become elderly than before, and as a result, although I can speak English, it becomes more and more inconvenient for me to do without. In other words, I prefer to just read and live in the world of Japanese. Fortunately, Newsweek has a Japanese edition that comes out every week. I subscribe and read the articles. I remember several years ago there was a very interesting issue in regard to the cover story. The cover, of course, always is a very interesting picture, and for that issue, the cover was the huge stars and stripes.
なんで今更日本にですね、出ている外国の雑誌がですね、自分の国の国旗書くのかというふうに見ましたらね、星条旗の一番最後の小さな星はね、最後の星は小さな日の丸でしたよ。
I thought it was very, very strange because this was, after all, a magazine that was being published in Japan, in Japanese. And why would this Newsweek present its own nation's flag, the American flag, on the cover? And if you look very, very closely at the cover, you saw that of the little stars, the smallest one was actually the rising sun, in other words, the flag of Japan.
I don't like this. これはですね、日本がね、敗戦の後ずっと今日までアメリカの、ね、囲い物、日本語ではおめかけと言いますがね、その立場できた一つ証だと思います。彼らもそう思ってたんでしょう、思ってるんでしょう。
I think this is an indication that Japan in the post-war years has basically been completely controlled and tamed and domesticated by the United States. To be very blunt, I think we have been basically the mistress of the United States. This is not something that we feel, but probably the Americans also regard us in this way.
そのおかげでね、敗戦の後、今日まで67年間、日本は国家的なですね、危機にさらせることがなしには来ました。
Of course, there have been some positive aspects to this relationship because for the past 67 years since the end of World War II, Japan has never faced a national crisis on its own.
ところがその旦那のアメリカがね、この後だんだん危なくなってきてね、だいぶこの年も取ってきたし、体力も弱ってきた。でね、このままでいくと、それからこれから日本と尖閣の問題で問題を抱えてですね、シナトもですね、非常におぞおぞが付き合いたいにいるから、下手するとね、そのうち日本は中国のシナの国旗の五星国旗の6番目のね、星は小さな日の丸になるかもしれませんよ、これ。私はそれは絶対に好まない。
But as time passes, we see that our husband has developed problems of his own. In other words, the United States has come along in years. Our husband, the United States, does not have as much power and stamina as before. As a result, we in Japan are going to be facing some difficulties that we must perhaps manage with our own strengths. And of course, I refer to, for example, the Senkaku Islands issue. When faced with this situation, we cannot simply hesitate. We cannot simply be full of fear and not be able to move. If we are not careful, it could be that someday Japan will become the tiniest star in the flag of China. I don't want this to happen.
皆さんね、世界全体をね、日本の立場で見回してみてください。ね、日本のようなですね、非常にその国際政治の中で危険なですね、そのポジションに置かれている国は今世界にないと思いますね。なぜならね、日本からですね、領土を奪ったロシアはですね、核を持って恫喝をしている。 日本からですね、状況証拠でいうとね、200人以上の人間をね、さらって拉致してって殺した北朝鮮もね、核を持っている。それからね、とにかく大きな強い覇権主義でね、モンゴルもウイグルもですね、食い潰しですね、チベットという国をですね、政治的にこの地上から抹殺した中国はですね、キリのない覇権主義でね、今度はね、その太平洋のね、覇権というのを狙ってね、その一つの先端基地として、尖閣諸島をですね、取ろうとしている。これはね、明らかに日本がですね、実効支配しているし、日本の領土だったんですけども、彼らはこの2月にですね、尖閣諸島は私たちにとって致命的な要するに利益の島だと。それで日本の実効支配を要するに破壊するために我々はもっと果敢な行動に出る。そのためのですね、艦船を含めた機材というものをですね、準備する。宣言したんですよ。つまり、人のうちにね、強盗に入るということをね、宣言した。この国は過去にもですね、そういう事件を起こしているんですが、私たちやっぱりね、再三このね、日本の家に踏み込んで物を奪おうとした人間たちがね、もっとはっきり国家のね、要するに意思としてね、人民日報でそれを発表した。その限りやっぱりね、もうちょっとこの島の家の戸締まりをしなくちゃいかんのじゃないでしょうか。
I'd like to try to describe for you how the world looks from Japan's point of view. When we look at the position of Japan in the world, we see that probably there is no other nation in the world that is as exposed to as much danger as Japan. Geographically, we see that up north there is this great country of Russia, which has in the past taken some of our territory, who holds nuclear weapons and basically resorts almost to threats and almost extortion in regard to us. We also have very close by a nation that has abducted some 200 of our countrymen, are keeping them and have even killed many of them. This, of course, is North Korea, and they have nuclear weapons as well. And on top of this, we are now faced with another great challenge, which is the nation of China, which is becoming a very hegemonistic power. They have worked very, very hard to suppress the will of various minority groups, such as the Mongols, the Uyghurs, and the people of Tibet. In fact, this is a nation that is trying to basically politically eliminate the nation of Tibet from the face of the earth. We know that this is a nation that wants to expand its control through the Pacific region. And as a result of their wanting to expand, they are looking at targeting the Senkaku Islands as a place to hold a fort or a base for their expanded activities. In fact, as you know, in regard to the Senkaku Islands, Japan has effectively controlled these islands for many, many years. However, in February of this year, the Chinese government officials declared very clearly that it was time for them to try to break this control that Japan had exercised over the Senkaku Islands. This kind of announcement is quite startling. It is very similar to a thief declaring publicly, I'm now going to break into this house and take all of these people's things. This was something that is an expression of the national will of this nation. It was announced also in the People's Daily as well. Since we are faced with such threats, I think that we must lock our doors more carefully.
今から45年ほど前ですね、佐藤内閣の時にね、ニクソン大統領との間に話がまとまって沖縄の返還が行われました。で、私その沖縄返還交渉にね、ついていったんです。佐藤さんはね、国会議員一人も連れていかないと言ってたんですが、なぜかですね、参議院では私、衆議院では竹下登をですね、正式なメンバーじゃないけどもオブザーバーとして来てよろしい、ただ直に来ると目立つからですね、他の国を経由してこいということで、私はロシアを経由してワシントンに行きました。その時にですね、沖縄返還のね、条文を作る時に、あそこは非常に島の多いところ、岩の多いところでね、それをね、全部記載するのは非常に難しいという話を外務省がしてたんで、それだったらですね、要するにヨットでね、私昨日もとてもヨットのレガタ帰ってきたんですが、ロールコールでですね、自分のポジションをね、教えるんですね。その時に北緯度何分何分、東経何度何分というそのポイントをですね、7つか8つ作って それを結ぶですね、線の南にある、海上の突起物をね、すべてですね、日本に返還するというにしたらどうですかと言って、それは便利だなということで、それが採用されました。その7つか8つの島を点を結んだですね、線の下に明らかに尖閣諸島は入ってるんです。
It's about 45 years ago that the Prime Minister at that time, Mr. Sato, met with President Nixon of the United States to work out the details of the reversion of Okinawa to Japan. Originally he had said that he did not want to be accompanied by any Diet members, but he decided to bring two members, myself from the House of Councilors and Mr. Takeshita from the House of Representatives, to accompany him as observers, not official members. But he also cautioned us not to accompany him on the flights because we would stand out. He told us to get to Washington through a different route so we would not gain the attention of the press. I went through Russia and eventually landed in Washington. And I therefore had the opportunity to observe the negotiations that were taking place. And there was some discussion about how to deal with all of the islands surrounding Okinawa because there are so many small islands. And in regard to the wording, I suggested, because I have been a person of the sea, I pilot my own yacht, and in fact I was on a yacht yesterday, but I suggested that maybe this might be a way to deal with this problem. I said that maybe you could have, in the world of yachting, you have people in their boats call out their positions. It's sort of taking roll call, and each person says, I'm at some so-and-so longitude, so-and-so latitude, and I suggested that if you have 7 or 8 points that you identify in this way and then draw a line between these 7 or 8 points, then you could have a line below which you could say all of the islands south of this line can be reverted back to Okinawa. I made the suggestion. It was considered to be a very convenient way to deal with the situation, and it was adopted. I've looked again at these original 7 or 8 points that were chosen, and it is clear that Senkaku Islands fall below this line.
そういう事実がありながらですね、その後にですね、大陸のシナと台湾がですね、共にそのね、尖閣は私たちの領土だと言い出したゆえんはですね、アメリカがね、沖縄を占領している期間中ですね、尖閣の周辺というのはちょうど太平洋を回っている黒潮が湧いて出てくる非常に豊かな漁場なんですね。それでね、そこでのね、シナやですね、台湾の、漁業活動はね、これは日本の政府はですね、苦々しく思ったけど、アメリカはそれ全く関与せずに放置してた。ですからね、そのね、水揚げの実績というものを踏まえてね、にわかにね、その日本がね、独立を果たし、あれですな、尖閣が、沖縄が戻ってきたときにね、彼らはその、豊かな漁場を失いたくない上に、自分たちの領土だと言い出した。で、日本は困りましてね、とにかくアメリカに協力を求めて、ハーグの国際裁判所にですね、島並びに水域の領有権に関して訴訟を起こそうとしたけども、彼らは出てこない。台湾もね、シナも出てこない。これはね、原告だけでは被告が出てこないと裁判が成り立たないんですね。そういうことを皆さんに認識していただきたい。それと、まさにそこがいける。
In spite of these facts, we know that at present, and for many, many years now, the mainland China, the People's Republic of China, and the Republic of China, Taiwan, has been declaring that the Senkaku Islands belong to us. The reason for their making these claims was that while the Okinawa islands and the Senkaku Islands also were under the control of the United States, there were very, very rich fishing grounds around these islands. This was because of the Japan current, or the Kuroshio, or the black current, which flows through there, is very, very good for fish. At that time, there were many Taiwanese and Chinese boats fishing there. This is something that the Japanese government was unhappy with, but the United States decided to turn a blind eye to it and to just basically leave them alone. After Okinawa was reverted back to Japan, however, the Taiwanese and Chinese governments wanted, of course, not to be able to lose access to these very, very rich fishing grounds. And as a result, they began to complain and make claims that they originally had territorial rights to this area. As a result, Japan decided that it would file a suit in the Hague International Court of Justice and to profess its claims that it had ownership of the islands and also of the territorial waters around these islands. However, neither Taiwan or China would agree to appear at this court. You cannot have a court case when the defendants refuse to appear.
沖縄返還に関してですね、当時の佐藤総理がね、一番気にしてたのはね、台湾周辺でのですね、市内よりむしろ台湾の漁船の存在だったんですがね、これは私も非常に尊敬した茅沖信さんがですね、蒋介石あるいはその側近の長軍と話をしてですね、蒋介石が理解をしてくれてね、結局沖縄返還のされた日には台湾の尖閣内に台湾の漁船一隻もいませんでした。これをもって非常にね、佐藤さんは蒋介石を他として感謝してましたけども。
When the Okinawa islands were returned to Japan, Prime Minister Sato at that time was extremely concerned about these fishing boats. And at the time, most of the fishing boats there were not Chinese, but rather Taiwanese. As a result, we made requests through a very, very outstanding bureaucrat at that time, named Mr. Kayo. He spoke with the person very, very close to Chiang Kai-shek. And as a result, on the day that the island Okinawa was returned to Japan, there were no Chinese fishing boats in that area. This is something that we were very grateful for.
しかしね、シナや台湾がですね、要するに、だって依然としてですね、尖閣は私たちの領土だと言うならね、なぜアメリカが占領中でもありますが、アメリカがですね、尖閣諸島のあちこちをですね、爆撃演習のターゲットにしてね、無人とはいえ島にですね、爆弾を落として島の形を破壊した。その時にシナの政府も台湾の政府もですね、これに抗議しなかったんでしょうかね。
But I would like to point out, if the Chinese and Taiwanese government feel so strongly that these islands belong to them, why, when the islands are basically controlled by the United States and the Senkaku Islands are basically used for bombing or target practice by the American military to the extent that some of the island's features were absolutely destroyed by the bombs, why then did these two governments not make any claims at that time, make complaints at that time?
これからですね、私とね、尖閣諸島の問題の個人的な関わりについて申し上げますけどね、尖閣諸島にね、最初に小さなハンドメイドの灯台を作ったのは私です。これはね、関西のね、冒険部の学生たちに頼んで、ある企業からも金を出してもらってですね、あそこにね、大きなバッテリーにですね、ポールを立ててですね、そこに電気を灯して上に傘がかける、灯台というかどうか、とにかく街灯のような灯台を作った。それがね、沖縄で尖閣で漁業しているね、漁師たち非常に感謝されましてね、学生たちも感動したんです。でその後ですね、それを聞いて日本青年社というね、政治団体がね、非常にお金を持ってるんで、自分たちがちゃんとした灯台を作ると言って、非常に条件の悪い中でね、過労で一人人も死にましたが、立派な灯台を作ってくれた。
From now on, I would like to talk a little bit about the Senkaku Islands and my own personal involvement in the history of these islands. Actually, you may know that originally there was a lighthouse that was prepared or built, erected on these islands. I was actually the person that developed or constructed the first very simple lighthouse there. Basically, I gained the cooperation of some young people who belonged to a kind of adventuring club from the Kansai or Western Japan region, and we all basically got a canoe or a simple boat and went to the island and put together a very, very simple structure. I don't know if you can really even call it a lighthouse. It was basically a kind of a glorified street lamp. But as a result, now there was light there, and many of the fishermen who were working in that area were very appreciative of this. However, after hearing of our efforts, a political organization called the Japan Youth Federation, which was quite wealthy in terms of funds, decided that they would build a proper lighthouse. This was easily said, but very difficult to achieve because it was under very, very severe conditions under which they worked. In fact, it was so severe that one person during the building of the lighthouse died from exhaustion.
私はかつてですね、運輸大臣をしてましたんでね、その保安庁コーストガードを管轄している役所でもありますんで、コーストガードの水路部、つまりそのなんていうんですかね、水路部にですね、依頼しましてね、現地に行ってね、正式な灯台として要するに認めるために足りないところがあったら直させるからと言ったら、2つの問題をね、その指摘されたんで、それを告げたら青年者はですね、すぐそれを直してくれました。でその後ですね、もう一回人を派遣してね、これでね、正式な灯台足り得ますということで、それじゃあ早速ね、非常にその岩礁の多い危険な水域ですからね、灯台としてですね、チャートに載せてくれと言いました。運輸省もそのつもりでそれを申請しようとしたらですね、日本の外務省がなぜか時期尚早だと言って反対して、それをね、その時の政府に取り次いで政府はですね、灯台を認めなかったんです。これは非常に危険なことなんですね。GPS がまだ発達してない頃ね、あそこを航行する要するに小さな船舶はですね、その灯台というものがですね、なんだかわからぬままに光っているとね、混乱してですね、特に嵐の時なんかね、人命の要するに危険にさらされるということを言っても、日本の外務省はただ時期尚早、つまり品を意識してですね、なぜか躊躇して認めなかった。それから20年、私の息子が同じ国交省の大臣にするまでですね、灯台は火がつけながらですね、チャートとして規制されてなかった。つまり日本の外務省にとってみると、そのあたりを航行するね、船員たちの命よりもですね、なんか品をね、要するにイライラさせてね、問題が起こることが、まあ自分にとって厄介だったんでしょうな。
In the past, I served as the Minister of Transportation, the Transport Ministry, and under our jurisdiction was the Japan Coast Guard. Within the Japan Coast Guard, there was a division which basically was in charge of mapping sea routes. And I told them that we had built this lighthouse, and therefore, since it was emitting light, it should be put onto the navigational nautical charts. I told them to investigate, look at the lighthouse to see if anything was missing, if there needed to be some other things done to make sure that it fit all of the standards for lighthouses. They pointed out to two things that needed to be changed, and the Japan Youth Federation immediately made those changes. As a result, I thought we were all prepared, but we'd be able to make the proper applications and get this lighthouse on the nautical maritime charts. However, although the Ministry of Transport was prepared to make these submissions, suddenly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stepped in and said, the timing is too early for such an activity. And as a result, they were able to convince the government, and the national government also decided that they would not make this submission. I, of course, said that this was really a terrible mistake because this was very, very dangerous, treacherous waters. This is the era before GPS systems were in place, especially for small ships navigating in the dark. To see a light shining that is not on the nautical charts is quite confusing, especially if you're in the middle of a storm. In spite of my arguments, however, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs kept saying, and probably because they were more concerned with not irritating China or making some kind of trouble between the two countries, they put that before the saving of lives of the fishermen who were in this area. So for 20 years, although the lights were working, the lighthouse was not put onto the nautical charts until my own son became a minister of the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport.
で私ね、横田の問題でね、10年前9月10日 9.11 の前日ですね、国防総省に行ってですね、アメリカ側の国防総省の理解を得るために、副長官のウォルホビッツと会って話をしました。その時に横田の問題でもね、外務省がよく動いてくれないんで、日本の外務省が意思がなかなかね、アメリカに伝わらないということを愚痴ましたらね、その時にその一つの事例としてね、 その灯台の話をしたので、ウォールフィッツがね、逆にね、石原さん非常に危ないんじゃないかと。ね、正式な灯台がね、記載されてなかったらね、後悔するにとってかえって危険なんじゃないかと言ってね、同情したくらいでしたよ。
In fact, as a tangential story, as you know, I've been very much involved in the issues surrounding Yokota base. And 10 years ago, actually, this was on September 10th, 2001, the day before the 9/11 attacks. I was visiting the Department of Defense in the United States. I was meeting with Deputy Secretary Mr. Wolfowitz, and I was trying to get his understanding about the Yokota situation. And as a side story, I mentioned this lighthouse. And I told him that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan was simply unsympathetic, would not allow us to submit for recognition of this lighthouse. And Mr. Wolfowitz actually turned to me and said, but isn't it dangerous to have a lighthouse that's not on the nautical charts? That's not a good thing.
次の日もですね、ラムゼルとそれからライスに会うはずだったんですがね、夜が明けてみたら目の前でペントガンを燃えてましてね、話はそこでストップになったんですが、私はね、自分の国のね、役所の悪口を言いたくないんですけどね、やっぱりね、日本の外務省は非常に堕落したと思います。
The next day, I was supposed to meet with Mr. Rumsfeld and Ms. Rice. However, when I woke up the next morning, the Pentagon was basically burning in front of my eyes. And, of course, all of the conversation stopped at that point. I am a Japanese, and I do not really like to say negative things about our own government officials, about our own ministry. But I believe that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan has been quite derelict in their duties and their responsibilities.
例えばね、田中角栄内閣の時にね、日中国交回復しました。その時にね、それに沿っていくつか実務協定が結ばれましたがね、その一つのね、日中航空協定は非常に歪んだもので、日本の利益は全くなかった。でね、私たちそれに反対したんです。その時にね、日本の外務省まだしっかりしてましてね、私たち青蘭会というグループを私たちが作ったんですけども、そのグループがですね、それに反対して2ヶ月ぐらいそれをストップさせた。結果として押し切られたんですが、その時にね、とにかくその時代の外務省の役にはね、時の大平外務大臣と周恩来首相との間に交わされた航空協定に関する秘密の電報を私たちに持ってきてばらしてですね、こんなことを言われて外交交渉ができますか、国益が守れますか、こんな外交があっていいもんでしょうかって言って、一緒に食事しようとか泣いてですね、飯も食いませんでした。そんな役に言えなくなっちゃった。
When I talk about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, however, I would like to point out that it has not always been this bad. During the administration of Mr. Kakue Tanaka, when he was Prime Minister, Japan and China, of course, restored their diplomatic relations. And as a result of their restoring diplomatic relations, there were many, many other side agreements that were agreed upon at the same time between the two nations. This was a time when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was still quite responsible, had a sense of responsibility and still had power and ability. We had a political group called the Seirankai, and we realized that there was a great problem with the agreement that was being discussed between Japan and China in regard to airline activities or our airspace activities, airline business activities. And so we pushed very, very hard and were able to work out a 2-month delay to the proceedings while we tried to renegotiate. In the final analysis, we were not able to get our ideas across. We were basically defeated in our efforts. However, I still remember that at that time, a very top official or top officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came to us. And we had a meal with them, and they showed us actually a secret telegram or secret correspondence that had been exchanged between Mr. Ohira, the Prime Minister, and Xu Enlai at that time. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs person said, look how disadvantaged we are in Japan as a result of this agreement. Look at the terms; they're terrible for Japan. And not only he was there, these people were there to eat with us, but basically there was no food eaten because they were weeping. They were so frustrated. It used to be that you had officials like that, but they don't exist anymore in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
もう一つね、日本の外務省の今の実態をね、非歴するね、事実を申し上げますがね、私が運輸大臣しているときにね、コーストガードのね、救難部長がね、顔色を変えて私のところに報告に来ました。とんでもない事件が起こりました。自分たちがですね、遠くから帰ってきて日本の本土の領海に入ったらですね、突然自分たちの、ね、船のそばにですね、砲弾が飛んできて3発飛んできて大きな水柱が上がった。もちろん船から少しかなり離れたところでしたが、実はその辺りにですね、4隻ですね、日本の小さな漁船がいたん。それでね、一体何だろうと思って望遠鏡で見たら、東京湾から出てくるアメリカの軍艦がですね、その大砲を撃ったらしい。それでなおね、近づいてすれ違ったらですね、タワーズってアメリカの駆逐艦でした。で、日本の領海の中で実弾演習なんか絶対しちゃいけない。完全にこれは条約違反、協定違反の。それでね、外務省にね、抗議をしてくれと言ったら、外務省の返事は、沖縄では年中あることじゃないかと。そんなものをいちいち問題にすることはないというのが官邸の意向だと言われた。
Another example of the great disappointment I feel with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, this was an incident that occurred when I was, again, the Minister of the Ministry of Transport. At that time, the head of the division of the rescue division of the Japan Coast Guard came to me, and he was completely pale and quite in a panic. And he said, "We have a terrible situation on hand. When one of our boats tried to re-enter Japanese territorial waters after doing some patrol in the open seas, suddenly 3 shots were fired on our boat." And none of them hit the boat, and actually they landed very close by. We were not hurt, but there were these huge pillars or columns of water that arose as a result. And when we looked more carefully, we saw that not only in regard was there the Japan Coast Guard ship there, but there were also 4 small Japanese fishing boats that had miraculously escaped harm. I immediately went to look at the site. I looked at through some binoculars, and I saw that there was a large U.S. warship just coming out from Tokyo Bay. It was a destroyer. It was called the Towers. Excuse me. Seems to be the name of this this destroyer. But obviously, the kinds of things that they were doing, they were just simply shooting, for target practice. They had no intention, of course, to hit anything. But obviously, what they were doing was completely against any of the agreements that we had in place with the United States. Therefore, I immediately contacted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and asked them to lodge a claim with the United States. The response, however, was this kind of near-miss incident happens all the time around Okinawa. If we cannot make a big incident of this every time something like this happens. And this is also the view of the Prime Minister's office as well.
で、私はですね、官邸というのは誰のことと、官邸の意向という限りね、その意向を表明できるのは総理大臣か官房長官の2人しかいない。もしね、その官邸の意向というものを表明したのが竹下総理なら自分は辞表を出して大臣辞めて記者会見する。もしそれが官房長官のね、小渕だったらね、私小渕君と非常に親しかったんですがね、私がですね、官邸に行って小渕をメンバーしてね、こんな官房長官をクビにしろと竹下に言う。どっちか聞いてこいと言ったら、返事が来ない。当然来ないと思いましたから、私は直にですね、官邸に行って、小渕官房長官にこの話をしたら、彼は激怒してですね、こんな役に処置しろということで、宇野外務大臣にね、連絡した。宇野はカンカンなと怒ってね、その役人を呼んでね、メンバーしたそうですが、私はそれでは収まらないのでね、ある人を介してね、当時の国防次官補ですか、次官補の網定時に連絡してですね、こういうことがあってはならない、この官庁はちゃんと処分してほしいと。じゃなかったら我々日米安保ね、維持できない言ったらですね、大変彼は恐縮してね、責任持って処置しますと。で、後日連絡があってクビにしましたと 行ってきました。その時に網地が笑いながらね、石原さんちょっと理解してやってほしい。タワーズ号の艦長はギリシャ系のアメリカ人でね、ちょうどその時にね、大統領候補だったデュカキスがね、レーガンに惨敗したんでね、あいつは頭にきてたんだろう。そんなものはね、私は信釈できないって言って、結局クビにしました。
So, since the Ministry of Foreign Affairs official said to me that this was the will of the Prime Minister's office, I would not back down, and I said simply, then who exactly in the Prime Minister's office gave these instructions? Because there are only two people with enough authority to give such a directive. One would have to be the Prime Minister himself, or one would have to be the Chief Cabinet Secretary. And I said, if it is the Prime Minister, if it is Mr. Takeshita, I will immediately resign from my minister position, and I will hold a press conference to explain why I am doing so. And if it turns out that the intent was expressed by the Chief Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Obuchi, I was very close to Mr. Obuchi, and I said that I would go to him and say that if you did this, then I'm going to go to the Prime Minister, Mr. Takeshita, and have him fire you. I therefore asked immediately for clarification as to who in the Prime Minister's office was responsible for this decision. Of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs could not come back with a response. And so I waited some time, and then I could not wait any longer. I went myself to meet with Mr. Obuchi because, as I said, I was very close to him. When I explained the situation, he was furious. He said, we have heard nothing about this. I'm going to take action immediately. And he immediately called the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Uno, who was also furious and apparently called the officials in question before him and reprimanded them quite severely. However, I still was quite furious and could not be appeased, and so I contacted the Assistant Secretary of probably the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Mr. Armitage, and said to him, this terrible thing has happened and it just cannot be allowed and you have to take responsibility. Mr. Armitage was quite surprised and quite apologetic and said, of course, this is not something that can be allowed, and then I will take care of it. And then some days passed and he contacted me again and said the person in question, this Mr. Towers apparently was, I guess, the commander or the person in charge of this incident, and he had been fired, I was told. And he said as a side explanation, the interpreter isn't quite sure she got everything, but apparently this Mr. Towers was of Greek-American...
Captain of the Towers. Towers is the gun.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. So the Towers is the name of the warship, and the captain was apparently it was not named Mr. Towers, but the captain was of Greek-American heritage, and it was a time when Mr. Dukakis, of similar heritage, was apparently running in the elections. I'm sorry, the interpreter doesn't get more than that.
レーガンとの大統領選に惨敗したんです。それで頭がきたんだ。
Oh, apparently this captain was very irritated that day because Mr. Dukakis had just lost the presidential election to Mr. Reagan, and as a result he was feeling great frustration, and that's probably why he was shooting these bombs, was Mr. Armitage's explanation.
あと10分ください。皆さんの知らないことを話させていただきますから。
Please give me just a few more minutes because I want to tell you some more stories that you probably have never heard before.
一昨年ですね、日本の保安庁の船にね、中国の漁船監視船と称する特殊な走行をした船が向こうから完全に突っ込んできてぶつかりました。日本の保安庁の船尾に。日本の保安庁のコーストガードの船は穴が開いて引っ込みました。でね、その犯人はね、捕まえたんですね。ところがね、すぐ釈放された。そのわけを政府はですね、ことが重大なんでね、沖縄県のね、地方の検事の判断でね、これを釈放した。これ全然全く嘘。これをね、そのかしたのは外務省です。地方の検事のね、権限でそんなことはできるわけないし、だったらですね、その検事をね、国会に証人喚問しよう、参考に呼べと言ったけど、全然それもさせなかった。で、その後ですね、これをすぐ釈放した後、これは中国の強い要請で、シナの強い要請で釈放したんですが、夜中の2時半にですね、閉ざしてある石垣の空港を無理やり開けさせてね、向こうのかなり偉い局長がですね、その船長を迎えに特別機が来ました。 そして連れて帰って向こうはですね、彼を英雄扱いにして迎えた。こういうことをね、とにかく日本の外務省が前立てしてやるってことを私はやっぱり日本人として許せないですね。
As you know, last year there was an incident where a Chinese fishing boat, or an alleged Chinese fishing or trawler boat, rammed into a Japan Coast Guard ship. And I say alleged because this fishing boat had a very, very strong hull, a very, very specially designed hull. It was such a strong hull that it basically made a hole, dent in the Japan Coast Guard ship. The person was immediately arrested. However, as you know, he was immediately released as well. The government, the national government, Japanese government's explanation is that he was released as a result of a decision made by a local district prosecutor. However, I would like to clarify for you here, this is an absolute lie. This was all done because of the behind-the-scenes workings of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In other words, it is impossible that an incident of this magnitude could be resolved by a local district prosecutor. He does not have that kind of legal authority, official authority. I said that if your story is true and this person really did have that kind of authority and did actually cause this, then he should be brought before the Diet, have Diet hearings so that we can interview him. However, the government refused to allow this to happen. After this man was decided to be released, and we hear that this man was released because of the strong urgings of the Chinese government, Ishigaki Airport, a local airport, was opened suddenly at 2:30 a.m. in the middle of the night. And a very important person of the perhaps in division or Kyokucho division class from the Chinese government came on a specially chartered flight. The captain was taken back to China and given a hero's welcome. All of this was done because of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. When you think about that this ministry, which is supposed to represent Japanese interests, is doing something that is very much not in Japan's interest, this is something that I, as a Japanese, cannot forgive the ministry for.
シナは結局ね、その飛行場の特別使用について料金を一文も払えませんでした。
I would like to point out that this airport was reopened at 2:30 a.m. It was a special time of night. The Chinese government did not pay 1 yen for the opening of these facilities.
尖閣に関してね、私はアメリカもね、なかなか頼りにならないと思うんですね。例えばね、だいぶ前ですけどね、尖閣に香港の活動家と称する、要するに特殊部隊ですね、これが上陸してね、あそこのね、灯台を傷つけて、そして、中国、シナの旗を立てた。日本の保安庁がね、行って追っ払った時にですね、慌てた彼らがね、一人溺れて死にました。それで向こうは非常に激高したんですが、ちょうどその頃ね、那覇でね、黒人のね、マリン海兵隊の3人がね、小学校5年生の日本の女の子を臨艦したの。でこれはもう彼女の体はズタズタになりですね、恥ずかしいもんだから家族も要するに沖縄から立ち去った。その時にね、ニューヨークタイムズでしたかな、ワシントンポストでしたかな、モンデルというね、アメリカの大使にね、尖閣にもうちょっと緊張が走ってね、ホットフラッシュがね広がったらね、アメリカはね、安保発動するかと言ったら、厳下に彼はノーと言いました。そしておかしなことに、尖閣諸島はね、台湾と同じように日米安保の防衛の対象になってない。そういうバカなことを言ったの。私はね、自民党に愛想をつかしてもやめた後でしたけどね、これは許せないと思ってね、コラムに書きました。彼を非難して、こんなことを言うね、駐日大使がいる限りね、私たちはね、アメリカ信用できない、安保条約誰も信用できなくなったら、私の友人の共和党の国会議員とそのスタッフたちがですね、これはおかしいと、こんなね大使はやっぱりね置いとくべきじゃないと言って、ちょうどケント・カルダーがね、初めてアメリカの大使の特別補佐官の制度ができて、就任してきて、彼のアドレスを私ここで聞きましたよ。その時に誰かが質問してね、あなたの人気はねどれぐらいですかと言ったら、私はモンデルさんがいるから言いますから、あと2年か3年いるですよと。5日後にモンデルはクビになった。それから1年半この日本にアメリカ大使を送ってこなかったですな。 フォーリーが来るまで。アメリカにとってみるとね、日本は結局その程度の国なんですよということを私たちはね、知っておいた方がいい。
In regard to the Senkaku Islands, this is, of course, a very grave issue for the Japanese people, and I'm quite sad to say that in regard to the Senkaku Islands, I do not think we can really rely on the United States for their support. This was an incident that happened some years ago, but there was a person from Hong Kong who said that he was an activist, but probably belonged to was a member of the Special Forces unit. Several of these people, activists, came onto Senkaku Islands. They damaged the lighthouse that had been built, and they planted a Chinese flag. When the our Coast Guard went to try to get them away, there was some panic and confusion. And during the confusion, one of those Hong Kong activists actually drowned. And of course, it was a very, very difficult time between the two nations. But right around that time, in Naha, in Okinawa, there were 3 U.S. servicemen who attacked an elementary school girl who was only in 5th grade. Her body was so damaged that her family was too embarrassed, too ashamed to stay in Naha, and they moved away. But this was a time when the relationships between all of these countries was very, very difficult. And I believe at that time, I don't remember if it was the Washington Post or the New York Times, but there was an interview with Mr. Mondale, who was the ambassador to Japan at that time. And the question was raised of the ambassador, if the Senkaku Islands becomes a big flashpoint and something really terrible happens in that area, will the United States implement or take advantage of the Japan-U.S. Security Pact and actually do some kind of military intervention? And Mr. Mondale's response at that time was that just as with the situation with Taiwan and China, the Senkaku Islands is not as part of what is covered in the Security Pact between Japan and the United States. In other words, at that time, I could not accept that Mr. Mondale would take such a stance. It was a time when I'd already left the LDP, but I was still writing, and I wrote very critically about Mr. Mondale in one of my columns. I also spoke with some of my U.S. friends who were members of the Republican Party, and I said to them, it's just really unacceptable that we have an ambassador from your nation with such feelings or such an attitude. At that time, I believe Mr. Kent Calder was sent to fulfill the post of special aid to the ambassador in Japan. I think it was the first time that such a position had been made. And he was trying to provide some kind of support. But I remember also that he came here at the to the press club, and he gave a speech, and I remember hearing him, and someone raised the question, how long do you think you will stay in Japan? And he said, I will stay as long as Mr. Mondale stays. In other words, he felt he had a responsibility to stay with the ambassador, and he thought, therefore, that he would probably stay another 2 or 3 years. After Mr. Mondale stepped back from the ambassadorship, there was a period of almost a year and a half when there was a period of about 1.5 years when there was no American ambassador to Japan. When you consider this, what I'm trying to say is that this is the way the United States looks at us. They don't take us that seriously. We are not of great utmost importance. We can be a country without an official ambassador having been appointed. I think this is a reality. I'm not necessarily criticizing the United States, but this is a reality that we Japanese must become aware of.
あと5分でね、なんで買ったかをちょっと言いますが、私とね、その尖閣諸島と妙な縁がありましてね、そのね、青年者が東大を作った後もいろいろ危険な雰囲気があった。そういうことで青蘭会の仲間と図ってですね、尖閣諸島の、ね、一部でもいいから買おうということで、私はその時の地主持ち主だったですね、古賀さんという人の未亡人に那覇に行って会いました。そしたら古賀さんがですね、残念ながらね、一月前にね、大宮の栗原さんとして撃っちゃいましたとで言いました。でね、私はその栗原さんという人を訪ねてですね、電話をかけまして、尖閣の問題でお話をしたいって言ったら、私たちは一切日本の政治家を信用しません。 政府を信用しません、一切政治家に会えませんということでした。でね、残念ながら諦めたんですがね、たまたまね、その栗原家のね、要するに今上だった未亡人の栗原未亡人とね、私の父がですね、汽船会社のある小樽の支店長をしている時の次長だった上野山さんという人の未亡人が大宮で親友でね、でその未亡人上野山さんがね、私の家に来てね、私の母親とも話をしたんです。その時母親が何かの拍子にその話をしたんですが、だから栗原さんなら私よく知ってますけど、非常に親しいんですと。それなら私の口から一回紹介しましょうということで、上野山さんがですね、未亡人に話してくれて、石原さんとしてはちゃんとした人だから話だけでも聞いてあげたらということで、私はやっとお目にかかりました。
I want to take just 5 more minutes because I want to tell you exactly why I made the decision to purchase the Senkaku Islands. It's a very, very strong series of coincidences, but after the lighthouse had been constructed by the Japan Youth Federation, there was a time when things seemed rather dangerous, and we in the Seirankai, the political organization I mentioned earlier, felt that we should take steps to try to make things more safe. And what I meant by that is that we thought maybe we should try to at least purchase part of the islands. At that time, therefore, I actually went to Naha to visit with the widow of a man named Mr. Koga. He was the I had understood that he was the owner of some of the islands at that time. However, when I spoke with Mrs. Koga, the widow, she said to me, "It's very unfortunate, but just a month ago, I sold my husband's islands to some people in Omiya, which is a prefecture outside city near Tokyo. And their name is Kurihara. That's the family name." I immediately called the Kuriharas and I said I explained who I was and I wanted to talk to them about the Senkaku Islands. Their response was very, very curt. They said, "We have no interest in speaking with anybody from the Japanese government, any Japanese politicians. We do not trust anyone." And so we were not was not allowed to meet with them. I had almost half given up, but again, the world is full, life is full of coincidences. It turned out that the widow of one of the Kuriharas, Mr. Kurihara, who had owned the islands, it turned out that my father, who worked for a shipping company many years ago, had once become the branch office of in Otaru, which is up north, and the gentleman who worked under him, his name was Mr. Uenoyama. And his widow was still alive, and it turned out that his widow happened to be very, very close friends with the widow of Mr. Kurihara. And by another strange coincidence, my mother, when I mentioned this incident to her, also had some kind of a personal connection with the Kuriharas. And as a result, I was introduced to them, and I was told, it was explained to the Kuriharas that I was a person that could be trusted, and as a result, we were able to speak.
それで、栗原さんの未亡人に来ましたらね、戦争中ね、中島飛行機という大きな飛行機会社があった。その飛行機会社がね、新しい飛行機をたくさん作るため、新しい工場を作る、その飛行機のテストフライトをするためのね、飛行場を含めてね、膨大な土地をね、一方的に何の保証もなしに国に取られた。それから戦後もですね、かなり広大な土地にね、大宮の市中に住んでたんですけども、それを区画整理のために2回削られてね、4分の1ぐらいになっちゃう。今でもかなり広大な屋敷に住んでられますがね、とにかくそれはもう4分の1ぐらいになっちゃう。で、私たちはもうね、政治にうんざりしてるんでね、一切関わりたくないということだったんで、私はですね、諦めて引き上げてきましたがね、その後ね、未亡人が亡くなってね、その栗原家もね、いろんな財政的な事情があるんでしょう。今の当主はね、青年会議所で、親しかった山東さんという参議院に、山東明子さんという女性の参議院議員に、打ち明けてね、石原さんならね、私は両親家そのね、その尖閣についてね、話してもいいということでね、私が改めてその今の当主に会ってですね、話を内定したわけです。以上が私のですね、尖閣に関する、ある意味で人の、縁っていうのは不思議だなと思うね、経緯ですね。
When I met with Mrs. Kurihara, the widow, she explained that she had really no interest in dealing with any politicians because of two bitter experiences in the past. During the war, there was an aircraft manufacturing company called Nakajima, and they were trying to build many aircraft at this time, and they had to build a factory. They also had to build runways to test these new aircraft, and so the government basically took much of the land that belonged to the Kurihara family in Omiya to build this runway. There was no compensation given for this land. And also, after World War II, apparently this was a very wealthy landowning family, because of rezoning policies twice in the post-war years. Their land holdings were decreased to about 1/4 of the original amount, and therefore, even though it's still a very, very large land from our point of view, for them they had great resentment, and therefore she had wanted nothing to do with politicians, and so I gave up. However, time passed, and the widow passed away, and probably there were some financial challenges that faced the Kurihara family, and the new head of the family, a gentleman, happened to be very close to a House of Councilors representative who is a woman belonging to the LDP. Her name is Akiko Santo. And through the Japan Chamber of Commerce Youth Division, she had very close dealings with this new head of the Kurihara household. And he revealed to her that they really wanted to try to do something about the Senkaku Islands. She spoke up for me, vouched that I would be a person that they could trust. And as a result, we were able to conclude this fundamental agreement. So it's all about coincidences. Life is full of hidden ties that bind people together. It might have been perhaps a kind of destiny that I was able to go to the purchasing of these islands.
ということであります。終わり。
The end.
Good job.
Richard Lloyd Parry of The Times. Can you tell us, Mr. Ishihara, what you think of Mr. Toru Hashimoto of Osaka? Do you think he may succeed where you failed in leading a popular conservative movement at a national level? And the second question is simply, why are people in Tokyo so uninterested in hosting the Olympics?
すみません、2つの質問でございますが、一つはその、橋本徹市長をどう評価されますでしょうか。知事が、なさろうとした、こと、つまりその保守的なその大きなその動きを、全国レベルで展開しようとしたこと、これはもしかしたら成功しなかったかもしれませんが、橋本さんはこういう、動きを実現することができると思いますでしょうか。そして2つ目の質問でございますが、東京の、人たちはなぜオリンピックにあまり興味を持たない感じでございますでしょうか。
最初の質問、橋本君はですね、非常にね、賢明な人物です。でね、ここではね、詳細を申し上げられませんがね、自分のある政治的なシチュエーションを非常に冷静に厳しく分析して、ちゃんと自覚してます。これはね、大会内で私が彼を非常に評価するというと偉そうだけども、東京がやってね、成功したことをね、彼全部真似してくれてるんですよ。一つはね、会計制度。世界の先進国の中で単式簿記なんてバカなことをやってるのは日本だけなん。みんなどの国もね、発生主義、複式簿記ですね。日本の周りで、ね、単式簿記なんてバカな会計制度やって、役人がいくらでも金ごまかせる国はね、北朝鮮とフィリピンとパプアニューギニアだけだ。皆さん知らないの。経済界の人も知らないの。当たり前すぎてね、経団連の会長ね、豊田章一郎ね、それから、キャノンの見たら今のタヌキみたいな顔してなんてあの3人とも言ってもね、知らないんだ。で、あなた方ね、経団連だったらね、いろいろ注文もできるんだろうから、国に行ってね、会計制度直させませんよと言っても全然やらない、怖がって。余計なこと言うと財務省が査察入れたりするんでね、さらぬかみたいな。ですから役人はいくらでもかもらせ。ね、だから東京はですね、これはいかんなと思ってね、単式簿記やめて、私の友人だった中地君がね、公認会計士の会長だったんで、彼と測って、 2年ぐらいかかって随分お金もかけましたが新しい会計書を作りましたよ。その発表したら最初にね、橋本君がね、大阪でやりたいから教えてくれって言うから僕はタダで渡しました。人もつけて。そしたら名古屋も真似するようになった。新潟県もやるようになった。でね、それが嫌で財務省はね、わけのわかんない単式簿記調整も作ってね、他の県に押し付けてるけど、新潟の知事なんか役人出身だけどね、こんなんおかしいと、やっぱり東京方式じゃなかったらダメだって言うんでね、新潟もやってますよ。地方自治ではね、町田市もやりだしまして、とにかく皆さんね、少し経済に関係のある人いたらね、とにかくそれを覚えてってください。単式簿記なんてバカなことや。だからですね、政権変わって役人信用しない民主党がね、これも無能なんだけども、何勘違いしてか、要するにね、事業仕分けなんですけど、そんなものはね、何も出てこない。大体この国はバランスシートがないんです。それからね、財務諸表がないんですよ、この国は。皆さんね、株買うときにね、その会社が有望か有望じゃないか、財務諸表見るでしょ。持ってる株がね、下がりそうかな、危ないかなと思ったら財務諸表取るでしょ。それがないんですよ、この国は。彼はね、それ真似してる。それからね、東京は少しは空気きれいになったでしょ。これ、トラック業界がね、協力してね、ディーゼルガスの排気規制やったの。大阪もやり出しましたよ。いいことは真似してくれたらね、東京の地震にもなる。だから僕、彼を非常に評価してる。で、彼はね、苦しい戦いをね、あえて挑んだ。これはね、大阪の市政ってのはめちゃくちゃです。ドアの連中が仕切っててね、1年間にね、大阪市の組合で10人以上傷害、刑事犯が出るんですよ。殺人、傷害、恐喝、麻薬。こんなね、組合持ってる国がどこにありますかって日本時代。それでね、大阪市の中ではね、14人に1人生活保障を受けて、西成区に至ってはね、これは動画のね、なんていうのかな、本拠地なんだな。これはね、西成区って人口いくらしても4人に1人、ね、生活も受けてるんですよ。この間そのね、特集を朝日テレビがやったら、朝日も時々いいことやん、テレビの方はね。あんなものは読むもんじゃなくて飲むもんだって誰か言ったけどね、新聞は全然私相手にしないけどね。それでね、その組合を相手にして彼はね、これから悪戦苦闘するでしょうよ。それやらない限り彼はね、そこからね、出れないし、国政にも出れないし、市長になった限りね、1期でもとにかく2期で、本当に命がけのことやらないとね、彼はね、なんていうのかな、政治家の公約を果たすことできない。だからなかなかね、彼のね、シチュエーションって苦しいと思いますよ。だから私はね、一生懸命いろんな点で彼を応援してる。だけどね、国政についての要するになんていうのかな、状況がわからないから、みんなの党が指揮にアプローチしてるけど、ね、彼は全然相手にしてませんな。うちの息子とも仲いいんですよ。自民党ともあんまりどうか知らんけどね、そういう情報がないからね、国会議員はみんなね、なんか寄ってたがってね、取り込もうとしてるけど、彼はそんなにバカじゃない。ちょっと話しながら、外国人
In regard to your first question, I believe that Mr. Hashimoto is a very, very wise man. I think he understands very, very well the political position that he finds himself in. I mean, he's able to look at his position in the political world in a very calm and rational way. He's able to analyze exactly what his situation is. For me to say that I regard him highly sounds a little pompous and overbearing, but I believe that I admire him in that he has taken many of the lessons that I have learned in Tokyo and used them for the benefit of Osaka. As an example, the accounting system is a thing that in Tokyo I've made great changes in. As you may know, in many government administrative financial matters, the accounting system uses the single entry bookkeeping system. In all the advanced nations of the world, it is only probably Japan and perhaps North Korea and the Philippines and Papua New Guinea that uses the single entry bookkeeping system. Every other country uses the double entry bookkeeping system. The reason that the double entry bookkeeping system is important is because without that, you cannot produce consolidated financial statements. This is something that even the leaders of the business world in Japan, for example, the head of the Keidanren, for example, example, they did not seem to be aware of this. I've spoken with several of the people there. For example, Mr. Mitarai was the head of Canon, who was the head of Keidanren, and also, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the gentleman who was the head of Keidanren. Now he looks like a raccoon. Is a literal translation. I believe it. The interpreter believes it's Mr. Yonekura. But the thing is that by using this single entry bookkeeping system, the officials, the bureaucrats, are able to basically hide their financial dealings, and they're able basically to control things. That's why the Ministry of Finance wants this accounting system to stay in place. I realized that this was very, very problematic. I told the Keidanren people to go to the government and say things, but they were afraid to confront the government, because then the Ministry of Finance might crack down upon them and look at their finances more carefully. So when I became the governor of Tokyo, I spent about 2 years and a great deal of time and money to ensure that we were able to change our accounting system. I brought in a friend who was the head of the CPA Certified Public Accountant organization to help with this. And now we have a good new accounting system. Mr. Hashimoto immediately wanted to learn about it, and so I basically gave him all the information for free. Not only that, but I sent staff from Tokyo to explain the new accounting system to him. At present, Nagoya City also uses our accounting system. Niigata Prefecture also does as well. As a result of these movements, the Ministry of Finance realized that they should probably try to regain control of the accounting systems, and so they put together a new double entry bookkeeping system that they could offer to the regional governments. However, the head of Niigata Prefecture, who was originally a bureaucrat from the Ministry of Finance, realized that this was not working well, and he said, I prefer the Tokyo accounting system more. So this is becoming more prevalent now. Even the city of Matsudo uses it. What I'm saying here is that unless you have an understanding of financial matters, you cannot really govern correctly. We know that the DPJ came into power and they had great mistrust of officials and bureaucrats. They put together these project review workshops or sessions. But those things really are useless unless you understand the finances behind these different projects. Another thing that Mr. Hashimoto has copied or learned from us is that, as you may know, the air in Tokyo is fairly clean now, considering that it is a very, very large city. Part of the reason for that is we have very strict controls on diesel engine emissions, and this is something that Mr. Hashimoto is also going to try to bring into Osaka. I admire Mr. Hashimoto because I know he's facing a tremendously difficult challenge, which is going to cause him great suffering. But when you look at the state of the government administration in Osaka, it is a horribly serious situation. The unions there are very, very strong. Each year, about 10 people, union members, are arrested for various criminal activities, whether it's causing injury or sometimes murder or being involved in drugs. Now, this is something that you cannot imagine in other cities and other regional governments. For all of Osaka, 1 in 14 people receive some kind of welfare payment. We call this livelihood protection or livelihood support payments. In a section of Osaka called Nishinariku, this is the central, the headquarters, perhaps, of what we call the Dowa movement. The Dowa, of course, the interpreter, just a side explanation, are the people who were discriminated against for many, many years. In this area, 1 in 4 people receive livelihood protection payments. There was even a feature about this situation broadcast on TV Asahi. Generally, I do not admire the Asahi. And when I think about the Asahi, for example, newspaper, I think always that the Asahi is something you should drink, in terms as in beer, not read. It is not fit to be read. But even the Asahi people do some good things every now and then, and that feature was one of them. So again, Mr. Hashimoto is facing a very, very difficult challenge, but he knows that once he has started this fight, he must see it through. Otherwise, he cannot take his efforts to the national level. He's basically risking his life in this. So from my point of view, I want to be able to support him in any way that I can. I know that when we look at the entire political spectrum, there are many, many people who are trying to take advantage and become closer tied with him. For example, Minna no To, your party, is approaching them. I don't think he takes them at all seriously. My own son is involved with the LDP. I know that they have many contacts, etc. I don't know, but I believe that he knows what his challenges are, what his priorities are, and he's working very hard to fulfill them.
The Olympic Games, popularity of Olympic Games.
オリンピックはね、東京の都民というのは贅沢でね、何があっても当たり前にだってちょっとね、うぬぼれてるしね、まあね、自分のことしか考えなくなりましたな。だいぶ他の日本人と違う人種になりましたよ。残念ですけど。
In regard to the Olympics, it's rather sad. I think that the citizens of Tokyo have become rather spoiled, perhaps, might be the appropriate translation. They expect the best. They're not surprised by anything. They're a little full of themselves. They only think about themselves. I think it's a very sad situation. I think that the people of Tokyo have become a different species from the rest of the population.
東京のオリンピックが実現したら、都民が来なくても日本中から国民が来ますから。
I think even if the Olympics are held in Tokyo, I don't care if no Tokyo citizens come, because I'm sure people will come from all over Japan to attend the games.
春子渡辺 HKW メディアリポート。ですね、東京から人が来なくてもいいとおっしゃいますが、マドリッドが85% ですが、その他の国がもう85%、90% になっているのに、東京が 62%、65% の支持率というのは、これはひょっとしてですね、知事のお人柄によるものじゃないかと思うんですよ。私たちもうそろそろ東京にオリンピックが来てもいい頃だと思いますし、特に大震災の後は日本人を元気づけるためにもぜひ来てほしいと。でところがその女性ジャーナリストに聞くと、どうしてもね、あの人が頑張ってるうちはとか言われるんですが、この際東京にオリンピックを来てほしいと本当に思ってらっしゃるんでしたら、どなたかが変えるためには変わらなければならないとおっしゃいましたが、例えば女性職員を登用するとか、ジェンダー問題をもう少し研究するとか、そういうことをなさるおつもりはあるのでしょうか。
何問題？女性
ジェンダーイシューです。ジェンダーイシュー。
男女、に関する。
ああ、ジェンダー。
ご存知でありませんでしたか。よろしくお願いします。
You mentioned earlier that you don't
Silly
care.
question.
You don't mind if no Tokyo citizens come, but when we consider that the people of Madrid support the Olympics 85%, and in other nations the support rate is 80 to 90%, when we consider that in Tokyo it seems to be at 62, 65% support, do you think that it might have something to do with your personality? What I mean by this is that I think many people, even in Tokyo, feel that it is about time for the Olympics to come back to Tokyo, especially in light of the big earthquake and tsunami we had last year. However, when I speak with my fellow colleagues, especially female journalists, they quite often say that the person that is standing at the forefront of the Olympics bidding activity is something that leaves a question mark perhaps in our minds. And perhaps do you think that it might be that if you were to bring in some new people perhaps, and maybe perhaps follow on through on such topics as gender issues, then that might lead to a change in the support rate? Do you have any intention of being involved in such activities?
あなたがね、東京の都民か日本人かよくわからんですけど、私に投票なさったかどうかもわかりませんが、選挙だと私割と人気あるんですけどね、女性にね。
I don't know if you're a citizen of Tokyo or a citizen of Japan. I don't know if you voted for me or not, but I happen to be quite popular when it comes to the elections.
私がね、辞めたらね、支持率が上がって東京に選挙オリンピックにもうすぐ明日でも辞めますよ。
If I could be assured that if I were to step down from my office and the Olympics could definitely come to Tokyo, then I would, of course, be more than happy to give up my office tomorrow.
Dennis.
Dennis Normile of Science Magazine. First, a comment for George. I think the comments about our staff were inappropriate at this point in time. For Mr. Ishihara, just what do you propose to do with the Senkakus? And would you be open to promoting international marine research in that area?
科学士のノーマルと申します。冒頭にちょっと申し上げたいんでございますが、会長のその冒頭発言はスタッフを職員を少し非難するようなお言葉はちょっとこの場では不適切ではなかったかと思います。で、尖閣諸島についてでございますが、もしその尖閣諸島を東京都が購入されましたら、それをどういうふうに利用されるのでございますでしょうか。科学史でもありますので、例えば海洋研究を地域で行う、領海で行うということも考えられるんでしょうか。
あそこはですね、太平洋をね回ってるね、世界で一番大きな海流の一つの黒潮のですね、ちょうど海底から浮き上がってくるところなんですね。で、非常に豊穣な漁場でね、マグロの稚魚なんかもたくさんいますがね、日本人の漁師はね、これハエ縄で要するにせいぜい釣るぐらいなんですけどね、シナの漁船はトロールで全部底引きで全部取っちゃうんでね、その稚魚までがね、要するに取られてしまってね、下手をするとね、日本の近海のマグロはね、もう絶滅する恐れがある。そういうものをまず禁止すること、それからね、私は沖ノ鳥島というところでね、国がやらないから立派なね漁業組合長がいるんで、彼と測ってね、船も作ってですね、新しい漁場を作って非常に漁獲が上がるようになりました。そういうこともあそこでできると思うし、日本の漁師がですね、もっとね苦労せずに漁のできる状況っていうのを作れると思いますね。それはマグロだけではなくて、それからやっぱりね、あそこに特別種がありますから、その研究もね、北洋、南洋でですかしましたし、それから誰か上陸した人がヤギを連れてってですね、ヤギが非常に増えてね、その自然が破壊されてるんで、この淘汰はね、小笠原で経験してやってます。非常に効率のいい方法を持ってますから、それは何もね、その沖縄のためだけで東京ということじゃなしに、沖縄のためにもね、そういうお手伝いできると思ってます。当然あそこはですね、非常に豊穣なね、大陸棚が落ち込んでいるところ、その漁場ですから、そういう研究はですね、活発に行ったらいいと思いますね、私は。国は何にもやらないんですよ。
In regard to the area around the Senkaku Islands, as I mentioned earlier, this is a place that is very rich in terms of fishing grounds. The reason for this is that there is this huge current. It's called the Japan Current. It is one of the major currents of the world. It is a place where the Japan Current actually rises from the seabed and rises to very close to the surface of the water. As a result, it is there are plentiful fish, and what's most important is that there are many, many young or baby fish as well. And when Japanese fishermen fish in this area, they basically use special nets or special lines that do not catch all of the fish. However, the Chinese fishing boats tend to use big trawling nets, and they capture just about everything. And they capture all the small baby fish as well. As a result, if this kind of fishing is allowed to continue, eventually we will not be able to catch tuna in the waters near Japan. So I believe, therefore, that the first step that we will take is to ban that kind of trawling or very heavy net kind of fishing. I also think, for example, we've had some experience in this regard in that there is the Okunotori Island, which falls under the jurisdiction of Tokyo, and there is a very wise man who is the head of the fishing cooperative there, and we've worked with him to try to develop a new fishing grounds. We have built a boat especially for this purpose. I think, in other words, we can do these kinds of activities so that Japanese fishermen will not have to suffer such a difficulty in their everyday jobs of fishing. As you have implied, there are unusual species that exist in this area. I think certainly research can be done in that area. In regard to the islands themselves, many years ago, someone who came onto the island brought some goats, and their population has grown out of control, and they've kind of destroyed the environment. We've had a similar experience with the Ogasawara Islands, where there was some damage to the environment. So we think we can do something in this regard as well. In other words, what we are going to be able to do is not help just the people of Tokyo, but also help the people of Okinawa as well. Also, the fact that these islands are located right at the edge of a continental shelf when it drops very far down into the ocean, this is a place that provides many, many research opportunities. The point is, there are so many things that can be done, but the government should be doing it, and nothing is being done by the government.
Anthony.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. I'd just like to say that I join my colleague in saying I regret that references were made to the staff here, especially as television cameras are present. However, my question, Mr. Governor, is you seem to be unhappy at what you see as the subservient relationship between Japan and the United States, perhaps with good reason. But you also seem to see China and Russia and North Korea as enemies or potential enemies of Japan. So my question is, in this situation, where should Japan look for friends? And if you were Prime Minister, or if you become Prime Minister indeed, what kind of foreign policy and security policy would you like to see Japan pursue, particularly with regard to its neighbors?
シンガポールビジネスタイムズのラウリーと申します。私もやはりその冒頭発言、スタッフを少し非難するような発言があったことは残念に思っております。特にテレビカメラが今日入っている中でそのようなコメントがあったことはちょっと悲しく思います。で質問でございますが、今のお話を聞いてますと、日本と米国の関係を見ますと、日本がちょっと従属的な関係になっているというご見解があるようでございまして、それについてそれなりのその理由があるかと思うんでございますが、非常に不満をお感じになっているようでございます。しかしながら、一方では中国もロシアを見ましても、こちらもどっちかといえば、敵のような存在というふうに、お考えのようでございます。でありますので、質問は、じゃあどこを友人にすべきだと思いますでしょうか。そしてもし首相になられましたら、首相になった日が来ましたら、どのような外交、特にその、すみません、外交と安全保障政策を展開しますでしょうか。
Concerning relationship between Japan and the United States, please read my notorious book, Japan That Can Say No. It's a great book.
German colleague.
それからね、アメリカもね、日本も中国のマーケットをね、過大評価していると思いますがね、つまりその人のね、創意発明というものを全く無視して盗む国っていうのは、私はね、非常にその、文明を支え経済を支える技術というものを損傷される点についてね、非常に危険だと思いますね。私はね、その日本でもアメリカでもね、いくらでもマーケットをシフトできると思いますよ。それはやっぱりインドネシアなんても可能性がある国ですしね、それからインドもそうですしね、そういうことをもうちょっとね、積極的に考えたらどうなんでしょうかな。
So I also would like to add that I believe whether it's the United States or Japan, I think that there is a tendency for people in these nations to overvalue or rate too highly the Chinese market. I believe when we look at China, this is a nation that does not stress creativity on the part of its citizens, but tends to steal ideas and technology when it can. And I believe that a nation that takes this policy goes against basically supporting civilization, supporting economies. I think it is a very, very dangerous attitude to take. I believe that for the United States and Japan, I think it is possible for them to shift to finding new markets. For example, Indonesia is a possibility, India is a possibility. I think there needs to be more active searching for other markets as well.
Please. Can you give us 10 more minutes?
Yes. Up to
what time?
2 o'clock.
Siegfried Knittel, freelancer from Germany. Mr. Ishihara, you heard the foreign correspondent club is not in the best financial condition. So I think would it not be better to spend the money you got for the purchase of Senkaku Island to give it to the foreign correspondent club?
先ほど冒頭の説明がございましたように、我々の記者クラブの財政状況はあまりよくありませんでありますので、尖閣諸島の購入にたくさんのお金が寄付されているそうでございますが、我々のクラブの支援の方にも少し回していただくというのもいいアイデアだと思いませんでしょうか。
Absolutely no.
Sam Jameson, freelance. To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Governor, you've never said anything either directly in favor of building nuclear weapons for Japan or directly opposing nuclear weapons for Japan. What is your position about developing a nuclear arsenal for Japan?
フリーランスの、ジェームソンでございます。今までいろんなご発言がありましたが、核兵器、日本が核兵器を製造すべきであるか、あるいは持つべきであるかということに関しまして、直接的なご発言がなかったと思います。日本と核兵器、この関係をどう見ていらっしゃいますでしょうか。
オバマ大統領はね、世界中のね、核兵器をなくそう、Yes, we can と言って、ノーベル賞をもらって、2月経たないうちに新しい核兵器のシミュレーションを始めた。これがね、その核兵器、世界全体の核兵器の実態だと思いますね。でね、じゃあ核兵器をね、使える国がどこにあるかって言ったら、ね、拡散はしてもね、これを使うことはほとんどいろんな点でできないでしょう。でね、私はね、日本はね、核兵器のシミュレーションぐらいやったらいいと思うんですよ。それでね、これだけの時間でやろうと思ったらできますよということを示すことそのものはね、まあジェームソンさんも麻雀が得意だろうけど、いいファン持つことだだけどね、私はね、日本の技術っていうものをもっとすればね、アメリカもね開発しつつあるみたいですけどね、コンベンショナルストライクミサイル、ああいう新しい戦略兵器はね、日本は持てますな、優に。それからね、例えばね、40億キロね、飛んで帰ってきたね、はやぶさっていうものの技術はね、新しいその宇宙兵器の開発にもつながると思いますね。シナはそれを盗もうとしている。アメリカは同じことをやろうとしだした。私はね、日本はその点では一歩二歩リードしていると思いますからね、こういったものも私考えることでね、日本が直接ね、核兵器との製造に向かわなくてもですね、一つの抑止力というのを持つことはできると思っています。
When we consider nuclear weapons, you may recall that President Obama basically took his slogan, "Yes, we can," and said that we want to get away from nuclear weapons. We want to abandon or decrease or step away from nuclear weapons. As a result of his stance, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Yet, less than 2 months after that, the United States already embarked on a new simulation of on some simulation projects for a new nuclear weapons system. I'm not necessarily being cynical, but this is the reality of nuclear weapons in the world today. Having said this, however, when we look around the world and we look at the different nations of the world, those which possess nuclear weapons and those that don't, are there really any countries that can use their nuclear weapons? And I think that for a variety of reasons, the answer is no. I think what Japan should do in regard to nuclear weapons is not actually manufacture them, but at least do research and do simulations so that they can come up with very, very clear facts. It will take us this amount of time and this amount of money and these processes to actually build a nuclear weapon. Once that work is done, they will be in a position always to be able to say we can make them if necessary. That, I think, is going to be a deterrent. When we look at Japanese technology, I think there are other areas that we can also focus on. I think this is an area that the United States is also focusing on, but it's the development of conventional strike missiles. These are with warheads that are not nuclear. These kinds of new strategic weapons are something that I think Japan should pursue more in terms of development and research. Also, we have the Hayabusa, the space vehicle that traveled 4 billion kilometers into space and brought back some samples. This, I think, technology is tremendous, and Japan is very much ahead of other nations. China is trying to steal some of this technology. The United States is trying to catch up. But I think Japan is one step ahead, and this will serve as a foundation for weapons that can be used in space. So again, I believe that we don't have to build nuclear weapons, but we should at least do a simulation so that we can have a strong deterrent in place.
We can take one last question, a short question and a short answer from the governor, then he has to go. Hasegawa-san.
ラジオ日経の長谷川と申します。電力不足問題について一言お願いいたします。石原知事が日本はベンディングマシンとか 電力を使いすぎているという発言があった途端にびっくりして、慌ててベンディングマシンの会社は省エネに走ったということでございますけれども、この夏乗り切るためのいいアイデアがございますでしょうか。
I'd like to ask about the potential shortage of electricity this summer. In the past, you've said that Tokyo uses or Japan uses too much electricity. For example, there are too many vending machines that always have their lights on. Having heard your comments, many vending machine manufacturers and operators immediately stopped using so much electricity for their machines. Do you have some similar suggestions about how we could save energy this summer?
政府がですね、具体的なアイテムを挙げてね、政令を出せばいいんです。節電のための。田中内閣の頃ですね、オイルショックがありましてね、あの時に、ね、政令が出されました。政令ってのはね、廃止というものをアナウンスされないから今でも生きてるんです。でね、私はね、だから今の政府に政令を出しなさいと言ったけども、担当の大臣が無能でね、政令の意味がわからないでね、なんかぼんやりした話だったんですがね、だから私はね、ベンディングマシンなんでね、あんなに夜中中ついてる国日本しかない、やらないじゃないかと。それからね、パチンコ屋もね、昼からね、とにかくガンガン音を流して電力使ってね、あれも節電したらいいじゃないかって言ったら、パチンコ業界はすぐ自粛しましたら、ベンディングマシンもね、サントリーは反対したんですけどね、コカ・コーラの会社がね、石原の言う通りだって言うんでね、節電に協力してくれてね、非常に助かりましたよ。そういうことをね、今の政府がね、新しい時代に沿ったね、アイテムを添えてですね、政令を出したらいい。やらないですね、今の政府とはね。そのね、排気量の処理もそうなんですよ。放射能全然関係のないところが入り物はね、地方が負担する以外ないじゃないですか。政府は政令を出したらいい。つまり号令を出したらいい。軍隊で言えば。なぜか出さないですね、今の内閣ってのは。
I believe what is important is that the government should probably take the leadership and issue directives, specific directives about how to conserve energy. In the past, for example, in the cabinet of Mr. Tanaka, we suffered the oil shock where there was a lack of petroleum, and there were specific directives that were issued about how to save energy. Even in Japan, you referred to the fact that I criticized vending machines. So Japan is the only country in the world where vending machines have their lights on at night. And we have the pachinko parlors, which have a great amount of energy that they use. They have this huge music and loud noise. When I mentioned this, however, the pachinko parlors immediately toned down their audio sound levels. And the vending machine operators, Suntory tried to fight against this, but Coca-Cola immediately said that's a good idea. And so they've cut back on their electricity. The point I'm saying is that the government needs to issue new directives to deal with the changing situation. I actually had a conversation with a minister in the government who should be in charge of these activities, but he didn't even know what a government directive actually was. So it was a very, very pointless conversation. I think it should be like the military. The top people issue an order and everyone follows it.
Thank you very much, Governor Ishihara, for coming today. Please accept this food coupon. We don't offer you with or without energy restrictions this summer. We are a member of our club, an associate member. We cannot offer you a one-year honorary membership card, but food coupon will be fine. And please come here and use them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed sitting here. I shall return.
Please keep seated. Keep seated.